Well, Memorial Day is upon us, and we want to take a moment, get Matt to say a little bit about his time in the U.S. Army Band, look at some jazz musicians who have served, recommend some great backyard music for your barbecue, time with family, and overall party weekend. But most importantly, we would like to take a moment to honor those men and women we have lost in service for our nation. Well, boys, as we get ready to start, I got a little bit of information I wanted to share about the history of Memorial Day and to say thank you to everybody out there. You know, we talk about history and jazz music all the time. Why not talk about what this weekend really represents and where it came from? This is just like an album to understand and unpack as we come into this week of music or weekend of celebration. So, with that being said, Memorial Day in history, the tradition starts as early as 1860s. Americans in various towns and cities began to hold tributes to the countless fallen soldiers. They did this during spring and decorated their graves with flowers. Some records even indicated that one of the earliest Memorial Day commemorations was organized by a group of formerly enslaved people in Charleston, South Carolina, less than a month after the Confederacy surrendered in 1865. What started as a decoration day by John Logan on the 30th of May in 1868, Memorial Day, as Decoration Day gradually came to be known, originally honored only those lost while fighting in the Civil War. This did change after World War I, and the holiday evolved to commemorate American military personnel who died in all the wars. This would include World War II, the Vietnam War, the Korean War, and the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. So today, this weekend, we recognize and take a moment, as we have, to honor those who have fallen and to pay our respects to those families who have lost loved ones in service of the military. Now, we are a jazz channel, and a history of music and the history of this great American classical music, as we've heard it referred to, is deep in our veins these days. We're going to recommend a couple of albums and a couple of songs here in a moment, but I'm also going to read off some names of jazz musicians who have served in the military and who have shaped the way jazz has formed since 1940 to current day. 1940s were pivotal for both jazz music and the U.S. military. Many musicians enlisted or were drafted, bringing their musical talents to the armed forces. A few of those names are as follows. Dave Brubeck, drafted in 42, formed one of the first racially integrated military bands, the Wolfpack. That's also where he met Paul Desmond, who was drafted into the Army. Glenn Miller, a renowned band leader, joined the U.S. Army Air Forces in 1942, leading the Army Air Forces Orchestra, which became a model for military bands. John Coltrane, a saxophonist, enlisted in the Navy in 45, where he played with the Melody Masters as the special guest. Clark Terry, trumpeter known for his work on The Tonight Show, enlisted in the Navy in 1942 and played in the Navy Band until 45. The great Wayne Shorter, saxophonist and founding member of Weather Report, served in the Army from 56 to 58. Sammy Nestico, composer and arranger, served in the U.S. Army during World War II and later contributed to the U.S. Air Force and Marine bands, also arranging for Count Basie Orchestra. Cannonball Adderley was drafted into the Army in 1950 during the Korean War and served as the leader of the 36th Army Dance Band. Matt, you'll have to tell me a little bit about that in a moment. Lester Young was inducted into the Army in 1944 and assigned to the regular Army. Through his experience in the Army, though, he found inspiration for a composition that he has named DB Blues. You'll have to check into what that stands for. Albert Eiler joined the Army in '58 after graduating from high school, where he switched from the alto to tenor and played in the regiment band. Marshall Allen, during the Second World War, enlisted in the 92nd Infantry Division, known as the Buffalo Soldiers Division, and was stationed in France and studied alto saxophone in Paris. Their service played a significant role in shaping both the music and the evolution of jazz. Their contributions continue to resonate, reflecting the deep connection between music and national service. With all that being said, thanks guys for letting me take over the microphone. Well, you don't have a choice. I'm driving the bus. But now I want to pump it back over to you guys so that we can get into some of our conversation and recommendations, as well as I want to find out what military life was like for the both of you. And of course, Matt, military band. What was your service like? What did you do? And I understand that you have started to warm the chops up. So y'all, at the end of this, stay tuned. I think we're going to have a bugler send us out.
So, Dad, why don't you tell us just a little bit about your time in the military?
Okay. First of all, I was drafted in 1969. Your mom and I got married July of '68. Within a year, I was in basic training at Fort Campbell and came out of Fort Campbell as a military policeman. And for 1 year, Matt, we lived in Bayonne, New Jersey, where you were born, July of 1970. By the end of October that same year, I was in South Korea at Fort Campbell, and I served there for 8 months. One of the interesting things that I got to do at Fort Campbell as an MP was provide security for Bob Hope.
Oh,
This OSU's U.S.A. Tour. And if memory serves me right, and Margaret was there with him. And when she came on stage, this place came unglued.
I bet it did.
And I thought we were going to have a riot like there would have been at Newport, Rhode Island. Because she just was, she's a beautiful woman. And she and Bob interacted. It was really a cool thing. So I was all over South Korea and Uijeonbu. I spent some time, just a couple days in Seoul, Korea, actually picking up the pay. Had to drive into Seoul and pick up pay for our area at Fort Campbell. So it was a pretty good gig. And obviously I came back, flew into Fort Lewis, Washington, and they served me, I hope it was a beef steak. A beef steak. Anyway, then
I could imagine after being in Korea, you're kind of wondering what that was.
Yeah. And then I flew to Detroit, where your mom picked me up, and I looked all over the airport and didn't think I was going to recognize her because 8 months away, I saw one gal and she looked so much like her, and I started walking to her and she boogied away, and there was your mama standing back there, and it was a great reunion.
Yeah.
That's my time.
Yep. You know, it's funny because you probably told the story about Bob Hope, but I had forgotten it.
Yeah.
I had not remembered that you did that. What a cool thing.
Yeah.
I mean,
his jokes were, wrote jokes, but funny at that point in that time. I cannot tell you how many people were there, how many soldiers, military people, a lot of Air Force guys. There was a lot of Air Force, and obviously Army was there, but thousands of them. I didn't realize there would have been that many there. And so,
wow.
One other thing, I spent a weekend right up at the DMZ with an artillery group, and I could look out from the post, from the camp, and look over and see the DMZ, see beyond the DMZ to North Korea. I didn't feel unsafe at all because I was surrounded by artillery. I won't tell you the condition those soldiers were most all the time, but you can imagine they had booze all the time. Yeah.
I can imagine that they were not snafu'd.
No. They were always on alert, always on alert. And I'll tell you one last thing. It's cold the winter in South Korea. Yeah. Very cold, at least the winter I was there.
Okay, so quick question, because I was a huge MASH fan, the TV show MASH. Where in relation were you?
I'm not real sure, but I'll tell you this. I'm glad you asked, because one night I had eaten some Korean food. The next morning I got up, I thought I was going to die. So I drove to the hospital. As I drove up, it was 4077th MASH. And I thought, this is crazy. You look back and say, no, I was there.
Yeah.
I was there. Where exactly? I don't know. Somewhere in the mountains, somewhere away between Uijeonbu and Seoul, somewhere in the mountains.
Wow.
And no Hawkeye was
no Hawkeye, no Pierce, no radar.
No. No. Major Potter. No, he came. I think he came later.
Wow.
Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
Every time I watch reruns of that, I see the mountain range, Dad, and you had said, well, they were off in the mountains. They were there. That's what I think about.
Yeah,
that's cool, Matt. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Dad, you mentioned Fort Campbell.
Yes.
In Korea.
Yeah, Fort Campbell's where I had my basic training. I think your brother has something to say about Fort Campbell as well.
I do.
Yes.
Is it my turn?
Rock and roll, dude.
Okay. Well, I joined the military right out of high school. After graduation, 8 days later, I was in basic training. I turned 18 in basic training, and the drill sergeant was not impressed. He did not throw me a birthday party. I had no cake or anything. Of course, I was bummed about that. After basic training, I went to the School of Music down in Norfolk, Virginia, and that School of Music was 6 months long. Now, I thought I knew how to play when I got there, but I learned so much more about my ability than I ever thought that I could. Of course, 6 months is not a long time to put that much information in your brain. So they expect you to know most of the stuff when when you're going in. So that's not a crash course in music, but sometimes I felt like it was a crash course for me. Norfolk loved it. It was a joint training facility between us, the Navy, and the Marines. So there was all three branches there at the School of Music. After I was done at the School of Music and graduated, actually, Dad, you came down for graduation from School of Music. I remember that, got pictures of it. And after that, I was stationed at a small little post north of Chicago called Fort Sheridan, Illinois, which was about 30 miles north of Chicago. So I was very, very lucky to be stationed close to home. Being in a small post that's mostly brass, you don't get a real feel for the Army in a small little post like that. We did jazz combos. We did parades downtown Chicago. I did some really cool. I got to audition to play taps in a movie. I auditioned for that. Didn't get the part, but I did. But at least I got to audition. I got to play a funeral for a fallen Chicago police officer, and it is just like you see on TV with the horse-drawn carriage and the helicopters flying around and the procession all behind it. So that was a big deal, being in Chicago. Of course, some of the presidents who were in office while I was in came to Chicago to do some speeches. So they would task us to go down and play for the president before he spoke. in Chicago. So that was just, it was just super cool to do some of those really cool things in that part of my service. After Fort Sheridan closed, I got a chance to go serve in the 101st. And when I got to the 101st, the band had just gotten back from the first Gulf War, still cleaning sand out of the tents. They were still, of course, telling war stories and the brotherhood that was already there. They didn't treat me as an outsider, but sometimes I felt like an outsider because they had that brotherhood of being over there and serving together. And just so that everyone knows, the band's job in wartime, not only to play music for the troops and uplift the troops, but they're on body bag details. So some of their details are not the greatest of jobs over during wartime. So I heard some stories about that as well. So the 101st, of course, has a long history of wartime,
action
and just adventure. I got to do some really cool things while I was stationed at Fort Campbell myself. I got to be on the beach on D-Day in Normandy for the 50-year anniversary of D-Day, and President Clinton was there. We did a little pass and review, got to march past the president. TV cameras were there, and of course, to be on the beach. And like you said, Dad, you look back and you think, man, I was right there. Now, I'm still a young kid at that point, not knowing much about history. I was never really a good student with history. So it wasn't until I got back and actually Saving Private Ryan came out, and you see that first 40 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, that's the beach I was on. That's what they went through. And I was, too young and dumb to understand the full impact of what they went through. So I still have some regrets about not my attitude being there, but me not appreciating the history of the whole thing while I was there. So I got to do some other cool stuff. We did parades at Fort Campbell as well, but we got to do the big pass and review on post where every single soldier and every single tank and every single Jeep drives through, and we're standing on the parade field as the band for 6 to 8 hours. We're standing there playing music and watching these troops, and the generals are all sitting in front of us. So we're facing, we're between the troops and the generals and standing there while they all march in and line up, and then the general gives his speeches and stuff like that. So those days for me, of course, those were hard days. Standing still in the same spot for 8 hours is not an easy task. But the band, we had one of our really things was just don't pass out, don't lock your knees, don't fall out. And thankfully we never did. No one from the band while I was at Fort Campbell, and I did 4 pass and reviews while I was there. No one ever fell out. And you could look to your left, you could look to your right and look to your left and see, you could watch them fall out. Those soldiers down there who were either hung over and didn't follow instructions, or they locked their knees and boom, they'd fall right out. But yeah, I was just proud of the fact that, the bandsmen never fell out during the pass and review. So I had a great time. My job in the military, I loved every single minute of it. I was sorry that I was actually forced out because I could not get promoted due to the retention control point. If you don't get promoted in enough time, they say, thank you for your service. Go ahead and exit.
Say goodbye.
Say goodbye. So unfortunately, trumpet players were a dime a dozen when I was in. The bands were all large. Trumpet players, they just didn't need to promote trumpet players, and they needed to pare us down a little bit. So it's not that I didn't try. I had points, I had almost all the points that you could have, and they did never drop the points for my MOS. So, but you know what? It's okay. My honorable discharge, and I'm a veteran, and I'm very proud of what I've done. So,
how many years did you serve, Matt?
I served for 8 years. Cool. Yep, I was in from 1988 to 1996.
Nice.
Yeah.
Remind me, did you not get some commendation when you were in Fort Sheridan for so many performances?
The funny thing is thank you for bringing that up. Being a trumpet player in the military, I was tasked with doing funerals. I kept count. It's pretty morbid to think about it, but I did 758 funerals. So during my time in the service, I didn't get a commendation for that, but I do remember one instance at Fort Campbell. The conductor, our band leader at Fort Campbell, he was strict. He needed things his way, and you had to be perfect, right? So we're sitting in concert band rehearsal one day, and he stops the band, and I don't know what crawled up his craw, but he called me out in front of the whole band. So, Specialist Rice, come up here, will you? And of course, you're sitting in front of your peers or standing in front of your peers, and he said, you were on a funeral detail last week, and the captain called me and wanted me to know how good you did. Play taps for us right now, will you?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I had to stand there in front of my peers. It's one thing when you're out in the field, with guys you don't know, you've ridden a couple hours with them in the car or whatever, in the van, and you blow taps. But when you're playing in front of your peers, man, my nerves were shot that day. And you know what? He looked at the trumpet section and said, you all need to play taps just like that.
Wow.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
And then you played in Greenland too, right?
I flew not in Greenland, but to Gander, Newfoundland. I flew over to Gander. There was an anniversary of a plane crash that killed 101st soldiers. Ice formed on the wings. The plane never really took off, and it crashed in Gander. That was the coldest I've ever been in my entire life. Gander, Newfoundland is cold. And the guys, they wanted to go out snowmobiling, and they wanted to go out and do this and go out and do that. We had to go out and get dinner. They didn't feed us very well, but even being out in the cold, just happened to be in the cold. And so I dressed warmly for the occasion, and I had a plastic mouthpiece so my lips didn't freeze to the mouthpiece. But next to me was a bagpiper, and he was wearing a kilt and a sweater. And I'm talking 30 below zero. So it's cold. And I looked, and I'm standing there in my coat, my dress greens, and my thermals, and my gloves, and my scarf, and I'm all bundled up. And I look over at him, and I said, "You cold?" "Yep." And I said, "Are you at least wearing underwear?" He looked at me and he said, "If I was wearing underwear, it'd be a skirt." It's a kilt.
Oh, man.
That's cool.
So
thanks for sharing all that.
Yeah, I was going to say, thanks, Hot Lips.
Yes.
For sharing your story.
Yeah.
Hot Lips.
And you may hear taps at the end of the episode.
I wonder if we could get somebody to play that.
Well, maybe somebody with a DVD or CD or something.
All right, boys, let's get into some recommendations.
Yes, please. Yes. Drew, I'm looking forward to hearing what you got. You go first.
Well, if you're looking forward to it, I'll save it for the end. I went less along the Memorial Day and less along celebration, but more along the lines of what kind of party are we about to have? If we have hamburgers and hot dogs, what kind of music do we want in the back? For a lot of people here at Lake Travis, they're going to get out onto the water with a 3 or 4 day weekend. So there's going to be party time. So I was thinking about that. Then I thought about something else. The party's going to end and you need to calm down a little bit. So what would that be? So my recommendation are this: Glenn Miller, The Best Of. It's a 14-song album, 44 minutes long, period. The other one that I just love, and I think that everybody, great as American classical music is, the jazz that we love, what's better than hearing Pops and Ella?
Oh.
So Louie and Ella together.
Okay.
And then for your calm down this evening, for the weekend, to just relax and have something different. The first album that he ever recorded with a flugelhorn is Clark Terry, In Orbit. Now, In Orbit also features Thelonious Monk. So I'm going to a true classic and favorite of mine with that flugelhorn. So to wrap it up, Glenn Miller, The Best Of. Ella and Louis Armstrong, Clark Terry, In Orbit.
That's a great list.
Great. Wonderful.
Now, I would tell you anything on the top 100 list that we've covered, it'd be a banging album. But those would be my 3 picks. And those are not even, Louis, those aren't even on the our 100. So what about Dad?
Okay. I'm a little bit tossed here because I got 4 or 5 picks.
No, 3 picks. 3 picks.
I'll let him give 4 or 5.
Okay. Ray Charles, America the Beautiful. I listened to that several times, and it's just so very moving. I think our listeners will appreciate that for Memorial Weekend. And then how about the Andrews Sisters? Okay.
Yep.
Playing the Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy of Company C.
Company B.
B. Why did I have C down? I thought it was C. That's B.
The Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy from Company B.
I could just see Matt playing along with that in his uniform. He's a Boogie Woogie Bugle Boy from Company what B? What B?
B.
Okay. And here's my other pick. When I was in Korea, the winter of 70-71, Chicago was played almost every day. After duty, we'd sit around and play eights or hearts or something. And one of the guys had a reel-to-reel premiere. He got it from the PX or whatever. And so he had all this music. And one of the albums was Chicago. Does anybody really know what time it is? Does anybody really care? That song's been going over and over and over. I think that's the second album that they produced. So those are my 3 picks.
Now, you've picked songs. I picked albums. So what are some of your other songs then?
Oh, okay. American Pie.
Okay. By Jackie.
Drive the Chevy to the levee.
Don McLean.
Don McLean.
Fats Waller.
John McClane. That's a Christmas movie.
Don McLean.
Don McLean. Fats Waller. This joint is jumping.
Yep.
If you want to get jumping. Booker T and the MGs with green onions. Man, green onions. And of course, old school. I go back, buddy. I go back. Come on, you ask me.
Reel it back in.
Buddy Holly and every day, and of course, Buddy Holly and your Uncle Steve, and the group that he sang with, they sang these songs all the time. Bob Dylan, surprisingly, the Ballad of the Thin Man.
Okay,
and that's during the time of Vietnam. So that's of course. Then again, I was listening to the Stars and Stripes Forever by the U.S. Army Field Band.
Yeah,
and I would say that in honor of Memorial Day, Matt.
Yeah,
I've already mentioned all the jazz legends that have played, and the ability, that history was so cool what they brought to the table. These bands are still playing today. Mm-hmm. Find it on YouTube and go listen to the Navy band, the Air Force band, the Marine band, Army band.
I got excited because it reminded me of music that I listened to last week from the Airmen of Note.
Yes.
Oh, I'll send you guys the album so you can check it out. It's not one on my list, but the Airmen.
It's on our list right now. Here's the cover of it.
Good.
Yes.
I don't remember. Yeah. Yes, it's amazing. Amazing. Good. So yes, go check out. Yes, believe it or not, the 101st Division Band does have a Facebook page, and you can go watch some of their performances. So, check them out.
Are you on any of them?
I was in pre-tech, and the internet wasn't around yet.
I was going to say he wasn't in the color guard. It was still black and white when he served.
Oh, you're killing me. All right, so for my picks, I went ahead and picked albums, and I picked albums from some of the artists who served in the military.
Yes,
some of the ones you mentioned earlier. So For mine, I was thinking Something Else by Cannonball Adderley. Cannonball, of course, was in charge of the 57th Army Dance Band.
Yes.
Was it 57th? Yeah, you'll correct me if I'm wrong, but
Oh, I will. He was the leader of the 36th Army Dance Band.
anyways, Cannonball. Listen to Cannonball Adderley on Something Else. You'll hear Miles on that album as well, but man, American to the core. That jazz music is American music anyways. So you can't go wrong listening to Cannonball Adderley. Like you, Drew, I picked a Glenn Miller album, but I picked The Essentials from 2005. Okay. And that is a 2-disc set, 2 hours and 2 minutes, and you've got all the hits. I mean, you've got Little Brown Jug, you got Pennsylvania 65000. All of Glenn Miller's hits are on that. I can't wait to listen to it this weekend, sitting out on the patio, the speakers on, playing Glenn Miller. My final pick, I think you mentioned him on your list, but Dave Brubeck.
I sure did.
Yeah. The Dave Brubeck Quartet, actually, and the album is called Time Out. you can't go wrong.
Well, and as I mentioned in the earlier part of this, that's also because of his service in the military where he met Paul Desmond.
Yes.
And so because of that, you hear those two play together. And I wanted to ask you about that, Matt. As I read all the lists and talked about the history of the jazz musicians coming through the military band, and the impact that it has made in both jazz music and their musicianship, Clark Terry and leading the bands and teaching so many others, did you come out a much better player? And what was that torturous regimen like?
I did come out a much better player, much more knowledgeable about all aspects of music. An Army bandsman, unfortunately, you're not just playing jazz music. You're playing marches. You're playing concert music. You're playing Dixieland. I was thrown into a Dixieland band combo one night, had no clue what I was doing, had the best time of my life just because you could just kind of do anything you wanted to with the Dixieland combo. And of course, playing the big band jazz music. Those are some of my fondest memories in those big band jazz concerts. I remember the concert band concerts as well. Dad, you and Mom came down to Fort Campbell for 4th of July one year.
I think Phil and I were there because I was going to say that was one of my fondest memories of listening to the performance from that stage. Yeah. And I remember you at some point in time before or after playing, you got to come out. And it was rare in your service did Phil and I ever get to see you because you were gone.
Right.
So I remember a 4th of July celebration. I'm not sure if that was the one you're referring to, but they wouldn't have left Thing and 1 and Thing 2 by themselves and gone to Kentucky. We'd have tore the house down.
Is that the performance with the fireworks?
Yes. But at Fort Campbell, because we're a division, we have the cannons, and we're playing the 1812 overture. And when it comes time, our commander will command the cannons to shoot, and it lines up perfectly with the band, even with the sound as fast as sound travels. So I always thought that was the coolest thing, is to be playing the 1812 overture, and when you get to the boom, and those cannons go off. And then they start the fireworks. Dad, go ahead. Tell them about the fireworks.
Well, Drew, you might remember too, but they let the firemen in that town let the Army people shoot off the fireworks, and then one went awry, one went stray, and then all over the field, fireworks was blasting all over and not in sync. They were not choreographed by a computer. But people were running, and we were told to be careful and caution, and the band, and they brought fire department and the water everywhere, and they were spraying it down. And he said, wait for a half hour, things will dry out, and then we'll redo the fireworks. And they did. I mean, they began to shoot the fireworks again, which was really spectacular as any fireworks display would be. Yeah. So, boom. It was going off helter skelter, man.
Yeah.
You remember that, Drew?
I barely do. I remember the occasion. I remember when the 1812 was being played. that was the first time that I really listened to the music and thought, wow. I vaguely remember being emotional and starting to cry a little bit, just
And Matt,
because of the power of it.
what was your impression, Matt? What do you remember?
Well, like I said, I those are some of my fondest memories. The 4th of July concerts with the cannons. If I'm telling people about my service, that's one of the things I always talk about. D-Day is another thing I always talk about, just because those stick in my brain the most. The having the actual cannons go off while you're playing, and it's all timed perfectly and synced up. It's just, yeah. So, all right. Well, those are my picks, man. I hope our listeners, you know what? I'd love to hear their picks for Memorial Day.
Yeah,
If you got a comment, you want to tell us what you want to listen to or what you're going to listen to on Memorial Day weekend, please let us know. Type it in the comments. Leave us a comment below. I'd love to hear what you're going to listen to.
Please do. That'd be great. That'd be great. Enjoy this Memorial Day for what it really stands for and represents. As you see men and women who are serving or have served, make sure to thank them for the freedoms that we currently have today. Regardless of where you stand politically, these men and women have served the United States of America for the freedom that we have and for the freedoms for other countries. So thank you for your service, the both of you I'm looking at. Thank you for everybody listening as well for your service. From the Unconnoisseurs to you, we thank you. Matt, send us out.